The notification sound on my phone was the last normal thing I heard before my life collapsed. It was 6:52 in the morning. I was still in bed, half asleep, reaching for my phone out of habit. A text from my neighbor, Dana. "There are police cars outside your building, like 4 of them. Are you okay?" I sat up. I walked to my window, and that's when I saw them. 2 officers already in the lobby talking to the front desk. A third one was on his radio in the parking lot looking directly up at my floor. I had no idea what was happening. I remember thinking it must be a mistake. Someone else in the building. A domestic dispute downstairs. Anything but what it actually was. I had 30 seconds of that comfortable ignorance before the knock came. 3 loud, hard bangs. Not the knock of someone asking. The knock of someone telling, "Open the door." Phoenix Police Department. I opened it in my sleep shirt and bare feet. There were 2 officers in the hallway and 1 more I could see at the stairwell. The one closest to me, tall dark vest, hand already near his hip, looked at me and said, "Are you Claire Mercer?" I said yes. He said, "We need you to step outside and keep your hands where I can see them." I want to tell you I stayed calm. I want to tell you I said something composed and collected. But the truth is I just kept saying why over and over, like the word would do anything. Why? Why? What's happening? Why? They walked me out into the hallway in my socks. My neighbor across the hall, Mr. Patterson, cracked his door open and then quickly shut it again. A woman from the end of the hall was already fully dressed, watching. I could feel her eyes. The officer told me I was being detained in connection with an aggravated assault and identity fraud case. That my name, my social security number, and my address had been used to open 6 fraudulent accounts, drain a total of $214,000 from 3 victims, and that one of those victims, a 67-year-old retired teacher, had suffered a heart attack after discovering her life savings were gone. I heard those words. I understood them individually, but they did not connect into anything that made sense. "I didn't do any of that," I said. I work in healthcare compliance. I don't know what you're talking about. They put me in the back of the patrol car anyway. I sat there for 11 minutes before they drove anywhere. I know because I counted. I counted the seconds because it was the only thing I could do. I had no shoes. I had no phone. I had no idea that 4 miles across the city, in the house where I grew up, my brother was sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast with my parents while they waited for news that I'd been arrested. I didn't know that yet. That part comes later. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without the context. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. At the time this happened, I was a compliance analyst at a mid-sized healthcare network in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd worked there for 6 years. I was good at my job. I had a clean record. A decent apartment, a rescue dog named Fig, and a life that wasn't glamorous but was mine. My brother's name is Derek. He's 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, Derek has operated on the belief that whatever he wants, he deserves, and whatever stands between him and getting it is the problem. When we were kids, Derek was the one our parents pointed to when they talked about success. He was louder than me, more confident, better at performing in rooms full of adults. He knew how to make my father laugh. He knew how to make my mother feel needed. He was the one they showed off. I was the one who got good grades and said thank you and didn't make noise. For a long time I told myself that was fine, that families divide roles, and mine just happened to cast me as the quiet one. I made peace with it. I moved out at 22. Put distance between myself and the dynamic I'd grown up in, and built something that was separate from all of it. What I didn't understand, not fully, not until everything fell apart, was that Derek had never made peace with anything. He had debts I didn't know about, decisions he'd made that my parents had been quietly cleaning up for years. And somewhere along the way, he had decided that the easiest solution to all of it was me. The interrogation room was cold in the way government buildings always are, the kind of cold that feels institutional, like the temperature itself is trying to tell you that you're not in charge here. A detective named Reyes sat across from me. She was professional and not unkind, but she had a folder in front of her that she kept looking at, and every time she looked at it, something tightened in my chest. She walked me through it. 6 bank accounts opened in my name over an 18-month period, fraudulent wire transfers, forged authorization documents with my signature. One of the victims had hired a private investigator after the fraud, and that investigator had traced the IP address used to access one of the accounts back to a device registered in my name, a tablet. A tablet I had given to Derek 14 months earlier when I upgraded to a new one. I thought I'd wiped it and given it to him because he said he needed something for work. I gave that to my brother, I said. That's his device now. I gave it to him. Detective Reyes wrote something down. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked, "Does your brother have access to your personal documents? Your social security card, your mail, any account information?" And I thought about the last time I'd been home for Thanksgiving. I had stayed in my old bedroom. My wallet had been on the dresser. I had left it there while we all went out to dinner because I didn't need it, because we were just going around the corner. I told her that. She wrote it down. They held me for 9 hours. 9 hours in a room with bad lighting and a cup of coffee that went cold after 20 minutes. I was allowed to call a lawyer, a public defender who sounded tired and told me not to say anything else until he arrived. I sat with that advice and my cold coffee and tried to think through every single thing I had done in the last 2 years that could possibly have been misread as fraud. There was nothing. I am meticulous about financial records. It's literally my job. What I kept coming back to was the tablet and the Thanksgiving visit and a few other small moments I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Derek asking me once about how work account audits were triggered. Derek commenting that I must have access to interesting information in my compliance role. Derek texting me out of nowhere 8 months ago asking if I'd ever changed the password on my old email address. I had thought those were just questions. Casual curiosity. They were reconnaissance. My lawyer's name was Patricia Huang. She was not the public defender. My friend Becca had called a real attorney the moment she heard. And Patricia was the one who showed up that afternoon with a legal pad and a look on her face that told me she had seen worse situations and gotten people out of them. She listened to everything. Then she said, "The IP address evidence is traceable. If that tablet was transferred to your brother and used by him, there will be metadata, device activity logs, potentially browser history that he didn't think to clear. Does your brother know anything about digital forensics?" I almost laughed. He can barely reset his own Wi-Fi password. Good, she said. She filed for an emergency review. She contacted a digital forensic specialist. And she told me one more thing, that if I had any documentation of giving him that tablet, any text message, any email, any photo, anything, I needed to find it. I found it that night, a text thread from 14 months ago. Me, "Hey, dropping off the old tablet today. Wiped it already, but let me know if you want me to walk you through setup." Derek, "Perfect. Leave it in the mailbox, I'll be home late." A small thing, an ordinary thing, the kind of text you send without thinking about it and forget about completely. It saved me. The forensics report took 11 days. 11 days during which I went to work with a knot in my stomach, avoided social media, and fielded calls from my parents that I mostly let go to voicemail. My mother called twice to tell me that Derek was devastated by what was happening, that he was worried about me, that the family needed to come together during a stressful time. She did not say she believed me. She did not ask how I was doing in a way that suggested she actually wanted to know. She said the family needed to come together, which I have since come to understand means we need you to not make noise about this. My father left one voicemail. He said he had spoken to a friend of his who was a lawyer, and that friend had advised that in situations like these, cooperation was always in everyone's best interest. He said, "Claire, I know you're upset, but think about what going further with this does to the family." I listened to that voicemail 4 times. I wanted to make sure I was hearing it correctly. My father was asking me to protect Derek, not to clear my name, not to pursue justice for 3 fraud victims, one of whom had suffered a cardiac event. He was asking me to protect my brother who had stolen my identity and framed me for a federal crime. I deleted the voicemail and called Patricia. The forensic specialist's name was Glenn Abernathy, and he was the most methodical person I have ever met. He testified later that in 16 years of work, The Derek situation was among the more comprehensive cases of premeditated identity exploitation he'd encountered. What they found on the tablet was extensive. Derek had not wiped the device activity after I gave it to him. The tablet showed login sessions for all 6 fraudulent accounts. It showed browser searches conducted over a 14-month period, how to forge a signature digitally, how to open a bank account with someone else's social security number, how to transfer funds without triggering automated fraud alerts, how long identity fraud investigations typically take. He had also kept a Notes app file. This is the part that still floors me when I think about it. A Notes app file with dates, account numbers, transfer amounts, and a running total, like a budget spreadsheet. Like he was tracking a business. He had labeled the file C Project. The C stood for Claire. Detective Reyes called me personally when the forensics came back. She didn't have to do that. She could have just had Patricia relay everything, but she called me herself. And when I answered, she said, "Ms. Monsis, Mercer, I want to tell you that we are moving forward with charges against your brother, and I want you to hear directly from me that nothing in this investigation points to you." I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside a grocery store when she said that. I had pulled over because my hands were shaking too hard to drive. I don't fully remember what I said back to her. I think I just said thank you several times and then sat there for a while after she hung up. Fig was in the back seat. He put his head on my shoulder. Derek was arrested on the Tuesday. Patricia had warned me it was coming and suggested I prepare myself emotionally, which I appreciated even if I didn't fully know how to follow that advice. He was charged with 6 counts of identity fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of elder financial abuse, and 1 count of obstruction. Because when the investigators came to his apartment, he had been in the middle of trying to factory reset a second device. He didn't finish in time. My parents did not call me when Derek was arrested. My mother sent a text that said, "I hope you're happy." 4 words. No punctuation at the end. I have kept that text, not out of anger. Or not only out of anger, but because it told me something I needed to know about what my family was and had always been. My brother had stolen $214,000 from 3 strangers. He had engineered a federal fraud case and pointed it at his own sister. He had used a tablet she gave him as a gift, and my mother's response when he was caught was to ask me if I was happy. I wasn't happy. I was exhausted and heartbroken and angrier than I have words for. But I was also, underneath all of it, finally free of something I had been carrying for a very long time without realizing how heavy it was. The trial took 8 months to get to. During those 8 months, I hired my own civil attorney on Patricia's recommendation. I filed a civil suit against Derek for damages, legal fees, lost wages from the days I missed work during the investigation, and emotional distress. My civil attorney also reviewed whether my parents had any legal exposure, given that my father had used my old bedroom without my permission as a staging ground for at least 2 in-person document thefts. That's what the investigators determined, by the way. The Thanksgiving visit wasn't the only time Derek had accessed my information. He had been in and out of my parents' house where they kept old documents of mine, tax returns from when I was on their account, childhood social security paperwork, a copy of my birth certificate my mother had always kept just in case. Derek had photographed all of it. My parents knew he was struggling financially. They did not know, they claim, that he was doing this. I have had a lot of time to think about whether I believe that. My honest answer is, it doesn't entirely matter. What matters is that when I was arrested, they called Derek. They did not call me. Derek pled guilty to 3 of the 6 fraud counts in a plea agreement. He received 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution to all 3 victims, a total of $214,000 plus interest. The retired teacher, whose name I will not share here because she deserves her privacy, was able to recover approximately 70% of what she lost through the restitution process and her bank's fraud protection. 70% is not everything. It is not justice in the way I wanted justice to look, but it was something. My civil suit settled 11 months after I filed it. I cannot share the amount, but I will tell you it covered every legal fee I paid, every day of work I missed, and enough beyond that to make a real difference in what the next chapter of my life looks like. I still live in Phoenix. I kept my apartment, kept my job. My employer was, to their credit, consistently supportive throughout the investigation once the facts were established. I kept Fig. I kept Becca and the other friends who showed up during those 11 days of waiting and didn't ask questions I couldn't answer yet. I have not spoken to my parents since the month after Derek's sentencing. That was my choice, made carefully, and I am at peace with it. I did not make the choice out of anger. I made it out of self-preservation and out of the recognition that some relationships are not repairable, not because of one incident, but because of what that incident revealed about a dynamic that was always there. I know that will sound cold to some people. I know there will be comments saying I should forgive, that family is family, that they must have been manipulated too. Maybe parts of that are true, but there is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the child in a family who is never the priority, and I do not have the bandwidth anymore to keep hoping that will change. What I have instead is a life that is actually mine, not performed for someone else's approval, not shaped around someone else's needs. Mine. The last thing I want to say is this. If you are watching this and you have ever been the quiet one, the one who got good grades and didn't make noise and told yourself that your family's dynamic was just the way things were, I want you to hear me. That quiet came at a cost, and you are allowed to stop paying it. You are allowed to stop paying it.